"This isn't the army, Chen," the property manager screamed when I insisted on evacuating the 27th floor for a minor support beam issue. "You can't just order civilians around like soldiers." He was right, civilians don't follow orders. That's why I had to trick, lie, and finally pull the fire alarm to empty a building that was screaming its death song in a frequency only a combat engineer could hear. Sometimes saving people means becoming the bad guy first and the hero later. My name is Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Chen, retired. For 7 years, I've been the head of maintenance at the Morrison Tower in downtown Chicago, 42 floors of glass, steel, and corporate ambition built in 1987. Before that, I spent 15 years with the Army Corps of Engineers, specializing in forward operating base construction and structural damage assessment. I've seen buildings hit by rockets, mortars, and truck bombs. I know what structures look like before they die. The Morrison Tower was dying, had been for 3 years. But try explaining metal fatigue and concrete cancer to people who measure success in quarterly earnings. I started at Morrison after my wife passed. Cancer took her while I was in Afghanistan, and the empty house felt like a tomb. The job posting said they wanted someone who could maintain critical building systems and ensure operational continuity. What they really wanted was someone to keep the elevators running and the toilets flushing without bothering anyone important. They got more than they bargained for. My first day, I did what I'd done at every FOB from Bagram to Mosul, a complete structural assessment. 42 floors, 8 hours, one very detailed report. The building manager, Richard Hastings, laughed when I handed him 30 pages of findings. "Dan, this isn't a military installation. It's an office building. We don't need." "What is this? Blast resistance ratings? You need structural integrity whether the threat is a bomb or time," I explained. "This building has issues, serious ones." He filed my report, and what I'd learned was an endless drawer of ignored warnings. The problems weren't dramatic, that's what made them dangerous. Hairline cracks in load-bearing members, subtle shifts in floor levels, corrosion in places that should have been protected. Each issue alone was manageable. Together, they were a symphony of eventual collapse. I implemented my own protocols. Daily walks at 500 before the suits arrived. Weekly measurements of critical stress points. Monthly vibration analysis using equipment I bought myself. The maintenance staff thought I was insane. "Drill Sergeant Dan's at it again," they'd mutter as I marked crack propagation with dated tags. "Measuring his precious concrete." The office workers were worse. I'd schedule evacuations for critical repairs, standard procedure in the military when working on load-bearing structures. The pushback was immediate and hostile. "You want us to leave for 6 hours because of a crack?" Jennifer Walsh, senior partner at the law firm on floor 27, was incredulous. "Do you know what our billable hours are worth? More than your lives?" I asked. She filed a complaint, the first of many. My clipboard became infamous. Pages of measurements, dates, progression rates. I tracked that building like a patient with a terminal disease, documenting every symptom. The southwest corner of floor 31 dropped 8 millimeters over 2 years. The expansion joint between the tower and parking structure widened 15 millimeters beyond spec. The harmonic frequency during high winds increased 0.3 Hz annually. "It's just an old building," Hastings would say. "They all settle." "This isn't settling," I'd argue. "This is structural failure in slow motion." But slow motion to a civilian looks like standing still. They couldn't see what I saw: the building's skeleton twisting under loads it was never designed for. 40 years of deferred maintenance. Renovations that added weight without reinforcing supports. A parking garage that channeled vibrations into the foundation like a tuning fork. I tried official channels, reports to building management, presentations to the board, letters to city inspectors. Each one filed, forgotten, dismissed. The building passed its official inspections because inspectors check boxes, not buildings. They look for code violations, not death sentences written in propagating cracks. So I got creative. I scheduled emergency maintenance during critical meetings, forcing evacuations. I conducted fire drills when my measurements showed unusual stress patterns. I became the most hated man in the Morrison Tower, the maintenance guy who cried wolf. "He's got PTSD, I heard one executive whisper. "Sees danger everywhere." Maybe. But PTSD from watching buildings collapse tends to make you good at spotting buildings about to collapse. The maintenance staff started calling me Drill Sergeant Dan after I made them practice evacuation procedures weekly. "This isn't the Army," they'd complain. "We're janitors, not soldiers. In an emergency, you're first responders," I'd tell them. "Know every exit, every stairwell, every choke point where panicked people will jam up." They humored me mostly. Lewis, my assistant, was the only one who took it seriously. Former Marine, he understood the value of preparation. "You really think it's that bad, Chief?" he asked one evening as we documented new cracks on floor 38. "Look at the data, Lewis. What do you see?" He studied my charts, 7 years of measurements showing accelerating deterioration. "I see a building that's tired, boss. Not tired, dying. And nobody wants to hear it." The morning of April 19th started with my usual rounds. 500, armed with clipboard, calipers, and laser level. The building was talking to me, creaking in frequencies it hadn't used before, settling in ways that made my skin crawl. When I reached the 27th floor, I found what I'd been dreading. The crack in the support beam had grown, not gradually like the past 3 years, but suddenly, catastrophically, 3 millimeters overnight. In structural engineering terms, that's not growth, that's acceleration toward failure. I ran the calculations on my phone. At this rate, we had hours, maybe less. The beam was critical, supporting not just floor 27, but transferring loads from floors above. When it went, it would trigger a cascade. 42 floors of progressive collapse, just like the models I'd run 100 times. I called Hastings immediately. "We need to evacuate now." "Dan, it's 6 a.m. I'm not even dressed." "The building's coming down, Richard, today." Silence, then a tired sigh. "Dan, we've been through this. Your paranoia is getting worse. Maybe you should talk to someone." "I'm talking to you. Evacuate the building." "Based on what?" "Another crack. The board already thinks I'm incompetent for letting you run your little military drills. I'm not evacuating 1,200 people because you measured something." I hung up and went to Plan B at 7 a.m. I called the fire department and reported a gas leak on floor 27. When they arrived, I met them with Lewis. "Where's the leak?" the captain asked. "There isn't one," I admitted, "but I need you to see this." I showed him the beam, the crack, my 7 years of data compressed into a 2-minute briefing that would have made my Army commanders proud. He looked at me like I was insane. "You filed a false report because of a crack. That crack is going to kill 1,200 people. That's for building inspectors to determine, not maintenance staff playing engineer." They left. Strike 2, by 8:30 the building was filling up. Lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, all oblivious to the death sentence groaning above their heads. I watched my monitors, strain gauges I'd installed without authorization, show readings that made my hands shake. The building was moving, shifting, redistributing loads as the failing beam approached critical. Plan C was desperate. I went to floor 27, to the law firm that had filed the most complaints about me. Jennifer Walsh was in her corner office briefing a team of associates. "You need to leave," I said, bursting in. "All of you now." "Security," she called immediately. "Dan's having another episode." "Look," I pleaded, pointing to the visible crack in the beam running through their conference room. "It's grown 3 millimeters since yesterday. The building is failing." "That's been there for years," one associate said dismissively. "You paint over it every few months. Because it keeps growing, don't you understand? This beam..." Security arrived. 2 guards who knew me, who'd walked my evacuation routes, who'd heard my warnings for 7 years. "Come on, Dan," one said gently. "Let's go to your office. You can file another report." "There's no time for reports." But I let them escort me out, my mind racing for Plan D at 9:15, with my instruments showing critical failure imminent. I made the decision that would either save lives or end my career in handcuffs. I pulled the main fire alarm. The electronic shriek filled all 42 floors. Emergency lights flashed. The automated voice commanded evacuation. And slowly, grudgingly, 1,200 people began moving toward the exits. I positioned myself at the main stairwell on 27, directing traffic like I'd drilled my maintenance staff to do. "Keep moving. Don't stop for belongings. Use all exits." Jennifer Walsh passed me, fury in her eyes. "You're going to jail for this, Chen. I'll see to it personally." Fine, I said. Keep moving. Hastings found me on floor 15, still directing evacuation. What have you done? Do you know what this disruption will cost? Less than 1,200 funerals, I snapped. Check my data, check the instruments, the building is in cascade failure. You're fired, he said. The police are on their way. Good. They can arrest me outside. The evacuation took 43 minutes. 43 minutes of controlled chaos, of complaints and threats, of people treating a life-saving evacuation like a massive inconvenience. My maintenance team performed flawlessly, stationed at key points, preventing bottlenecks, keeping people moving. By 10 o'clock, the Morrison Tower was empty except for a handful of security guards and managers documenting my criminal act. I stood in the plaza, surrounded by angry executives and approaching police sirens, watching the building I'd monitored for 7 years. You're going to pay for this, Jennifer Walsh promised, her entire firm gathered behind her like an army of suits. Filing false reports, causing panic, economic disruption, the sound cut her off. Not an explosion. Not a dramatic movie moment. Just a deep, grinding groan of steel giving up. 40 stories up, windows shattered as the frame twisted. The southwest corner, where I'd documented years of progressive failure, visibly sagged. Move back, I roared in my command voice. Everyone back now? This time they listened. The crowd surged away from the building as the groaning became screaming metal. The 27th floor, where the critical beam had finally surrendered, pancaked. Then 28, then 29. Each floor hammering the one below, creating a cascade of destruction that looked slow motion but took only seconds. The Morrison Tower didn't fall sideways like a tree. It collapsed into itself, each floor adding mass and momentum to an unstoppable vertical avalanche. 42 floors became 10, then 5, then a cloud of dust and debris spreading across downtown Chicago. The silence afterward was deafening. 1,200 people stood in that plaza, covered in dust, watching the empty space where their offices had been. Where they would have been. Jennifer Walsh was on her knees, staring at the rubble that had been her corner office. Hastings was white as paper, phone hanging limply in his hand. The police who'd come to arrest me were calling for backup, ambulances, crisis management. My God, someone whispered. We were in there, we were all in there. Lewis found me in the chaos, tears streaming down his dust-covered face. Chief, you did it, you saved them all. We did it, I corrected. Those evacuation drills you hated? That's what saved them. The aftermath was investigation, vindication, and irony. My 7 years of documentation became evidence in the largest structural failure investigation in Chicago history. Every crack I'd measured, every report I'd filed, every warning I'd given was suddenly precious. The paranoid maintenance man became the vigilant hero who saw what others missed. The building owners faced criminal charges for deferred maintenance. Inspectors lost licenses for pencil-whipping reports. New legislation passed requiring enhanced structural monitoring for aging buildings. They called it the Chen Protocol, Mandatory Evacuation Authority for Certified Structural Concerns. Jennifer Walsh's firm offered to represent me pro bono in any legal matters. I owe you my life, she said simply. We all do. You don't owe me anything, I told her. You owe it to the next maintenance guy who tells you something's wrong. Listen to them. They offered me jobs everywhere: consulting firms, inspection companies, building management corporations. I turned them all down. Instead, I teach now. I train maintenance staff, building engineers, property managers. I show them my clipboard from Morrison Tower, 7 years of measurements that nobody wanted to see until it was almost too late. Every building talks, I tell my classes. It tells you when it's sick, when it's tired, when it's dying. Your job is to listen. And when you hear death coming, you don't ask permission to save lives. You just do it. They gave me medals, awards, keys to the city. But the only recognition that matters hangs in my small office. A photo from the plaza that day. 1,200 people covered in dust but alive, standing where they shouldn't have been standing, breathing when they should have been buried. Hastings sent me a letter 6 months later. Short, simple. I'm sorry I didn't listen. Thank you for not giving up. I still wake up at 500, old habits. But now instead of walking empty corridors with a clipboard, I prepare lessons for the next generation of building guardians. I teach them to read cracks like stories, to feel vibrations like heartbeats, to trust their instincts when everyone else trusts routine. And I always end with the same message. They'll call you paranoid, they'll call you drill sergeant, they'll threaten to fire you for disrupting their comfortable routines. Let them. Your job isn't to be liked, your job is to keep them alive. And sometimes that means pulling the fire alarm when the only fire is in the failing steel they refuse to see. The Morrison Tower collapse killed nobody. 0 fatalities in a 42-story progressive collapse during business hours. They call it a miracle. I call it preparation meeting opportunity. 7 years of obsessive documentation, weekly evacuation drills, a maintenance staff trained like soldiers, and one old combat engineer too stubborn to let bureaucracy bury 1,200 people. They don't call me Drill Sergeant Dan anymore. Now it's Professor Chen or the man who saved Morrison Tower. But I know the truth. I didn't save a building. Buildings can't be saved once the cancer spreads too far. I saved the people inside by being the bad guy long enough to become the good guy, by choosing their lives over their convenience, by pulling that alarm knowing I'd probably go to jail. Sometimes that's what heroes look like, not soldiers rushing into battle, but maintenance men with clipboards who refuse to shut up about cracks in the concrete. The next building will fall. Somewhere right now, another Dan Chen is measuring cracks, filing reports being ignored. The only question is whether anyone will listen before the groaning starts. I hope they do. But I teach my students to prepare for when they don't. Because in the end, 1,200 lives matter more than 1,200 complaints. That's the math that matters when the building starts to sing its death song. And someone has to hear the music.